All right, welcome back to Search for Truth Reality. We've had a nice lunch together. Thank you, Bob. It's great. We're going to continue our conversation, and I know that both of you would like to cover a couple of things. I want to start with Bill because there's some things that you definitely want to talk about. Life with the Admiral during the war.
Well, what I was alluding to is it was important to understand that the subject that's coming back from Germany by the operatives, they're bringing information back that is totally, almost unbelievable. Admiral Ricabada many times shook his head as the operative is trying to describe that particular portion of some of these programs. It was difficult to realize that there were thousands of situations that had been implemented into Germany by the extraterrestrials, totally changing their way of life, including extending some of the Germans' life, because the extended life program was already in operation in Germany way before it got started at TRW later on in many years.
Did it actually get started at TRW, or was that just a study?
It was a study that went into a program. The program involved the four largest advanced medical companies in the country. It has been a classified program. Scripps in La Jolla, California, is heavily involved in this program. And I've talked to a number of people there at Scripps who are currently still working on this program. And I think that it's nice if you sort of let me describe what happens to people that get on the program. And there's been over, I'd say at least 50 or 60 men in the past 20 years, and probably over 40 of women that have been involved in this extended life program. And it's all the way from a few weeks of extended life out to the highest is 43 years. And so the TRW initiated program, of course, when Northrop Grumman bought TRW, they got the extended life program too. So Northrop Grumman then got more involved themselves, even with considering that they now had an enormous laboratory, one space park, Redondo Beach, with the thrust to extend our life here. And so repeating a little bit, it takes 2 or 4 shots or 4 essentially aspirins over a 4-month period, one month at a time. And you immediately start to feel better. Different people were able to, their systems were able to accept the program faster than others. Many of the fellows were really slow in getting through it, and it took them a good 4 months to make the transition. But what happens is the men return back to 29. There's different years. Some of them been 32, some of them were even 26, but 29 was the number that they finally ended up with. You go back to 29. The young ladies have always gone back to 21. The big advantage here is that you have a minimum of 400% greater capability use of your brain. And of course, if we go back to the present time, where we are still only using 2.3% of our brain, not because that's what we have chosen, but it's because the reptilians have been controlling our minds on this planet for thousands of years. everybody asks the question, well, why is that? What does that have to do with extended life? What does that have to do with everything? Turns out that extended life allows you to physically be in the same capability that you were at that younger age. Not just live longer, but be able to have all of the muscles, all of your systems, all of your organs young. Everything about you then is only 29 years old. This then is, if you want to use a comparison, sort of an opposite direction of what some of the Solar Warden naval officers who have recently spoken publicly about returning from previous lives aboard Navy spacecraft carriers. They essentially reverse that operation, and their mind is then blocked to where they have no memory of the 20 years they spent in the Navy. Now, if they have gone ahead and developed a second phase of another 20 years in the Navy, they also had an option, I understand, to where they could start over or continue at the same age of the first 20 years. So this system has many different aspects to it. Its relationship to us in reversing our capability and increasing our technical capability is extremely important because, frankly, we don't have time in 75 years to even find out what's going on.
Which is your average lifespan of a human. So what you're saying is with the age regression, life extension, you become more capable, useful, able to contribute more because you grow up to a certain point, you become intelligent, you can increase that intelligence. This is one other effect of the life preservation that you've mentioned to me before that involves the capacity, the mental capacity. What is that?
Yeah, your mental capacity goes up 400% minimum. Some of it even to 700 and 800%, okay? This is staggering because it was already in your brain, but you haven't been using that like Nordic people that live 2,400 years or whatever, and the blue people too. But not being able to live that long restricts the use of the brain that you do have, and for the reptilians to be controlling our brain capability, that's one thing, but to prevent us from living longer, I guess you have to ask the question, well, why would they do that? If they kept us running for a longer period of time, they could use us more. But there's kind of a side effect that's in this. And it gets into an area that Bob and I have discussed, and I guess you and I have discussed too, and probably be better not to get in that part.
Okay, very well. Fair enough. I just want to make it clear for our audience that aspirin is a billism for any pill or drug. It's not you're taking 4 aspirin, so don't go run out there taking your aspirin 1 a month because it's nothing's going to happen. The blue people, you've mentioned them just a moment ago. Now, is this something from your own experience or something that you've heard from others?
I have to discuss my part because yes, there's a great deal of data about them helping us now, but essentially, one of the groups of people that were assisting TRW, Nordic people, were the blue type. The level of assistance was primarily advisory, not by a person, but by the thoughts. So the information was coming to them similar to similar to the way that I got information from my Nordic secretary at Douglas. okay, on the Apollo program. Except she was there, but she could telepathically give me the information. I could be in Huntsville, Alabama, and she's in Santa Monica, and she could tell me what to do.
She's physically present. I mean, she's in this realm. She's in this 3D world. If I'm hearing you right, the blue
people were not physically here. They were here, their minds were here, but they weren't here in their bodies.
Were you the only one experiencing the interface with the blue people?
Did I what?
Or are you the only one that's interfacing or communicating?
No, there's thousands of people that have been interfacing with them.
Mm-hmm. But in the context of TRW and the research that's being done there, was there anybody else there at TRW who?
Yes, there's different programs that they were involved in. And they were then shown in a way that their thought levels were in the conference rooms in technical meetings. And they would make their suggestions telepathically. And say one of the people that was in the meeting that was not familiar with that correspondence or those people would end up saying, those are the blues that are talking over there. That's their recommendation. And yes, they fully understand our problems in the program. So essentially what you have is telepathic information being suggested not to 3 or 5 people in the meeting, but to all of the people in the meeting. So everybody hears the suggestion. Well, where did that come from?
Well, as though they're there. So what you're telling me is everybody in that room, for whatever the purpose is and whatever the project is, everyone is privy to the blue people communication through telepathic thought.
In that level of TRW, yes, and on those programs of TRW, totally unaware in most of engineering, okay? Separate program communication advisory.
How long ago did they start their communications with TRW? Do you have any idea?
Well, this was shortly after TRW formed, okay, which was 58, 59 time period. And most of the people in TRW were actually technical consultants to the think tank at Douglas before they got involved with TRW Space Systems. And Thompson, Ramo, and Woolrich were the 3 people that were working for Douglas on these programs. So they separated and formed their own company. But the company, unlike most think tank organizations, was able to essentially come up with a requirement. The monies would be unlimited to study that program, so they do a brief program study on it, and then if it appeared to be something that was plausible, funds would just be flowing out. We have never had a problem getting money to implement different programs or different systems, medical systems, space systems, commercial systems, because we even had, like at Douglas, we had commercial space systems in design and development at TRW too. So it was easy for us to get together, have different people come in, make the recommendations on the program, and then be part of a reviewing team to establish whether we're going to go full bore on that program, and then come up with an unsolicited bid back to whatever organization this would be orientated to. If it was an Air Force missile program, we'd go for that program. If it was a Navy space communication satellite program, we'd develop an unsolicited bid for that. And I think that doing that and having advisors, such as the blue people, addressing what they were most interested in was commercial involvements, but they also assisted in the military. And so this was a major thrust inside of hundreds of different laboratories and subsystem labs who are boxed into different areas. So it's a program that the other laboratories are totally unaware of. And the top, of course, corporate, are aware of all of the programs. But different labs are totally, in fact, in some cases, there would be as many as 3 separate laboratories studying the same subject and addressing it in a different manner to find out previous to the trade-off studies. And I didn't get into trade-off studies before because they weren't done in engineering in most companies. Most companies would develop a new system and agree that that's the way it should be done. They freeze the design and they run with that development of that design. At TRW, it was always different. You went through that first phase. You came up with all of the background information, and you're convinced that's the best way to approach that program. Then you drop it. You come up with 2 different ways to initiate and discuss that program. They're called trade-off studies. Long before you ever got to an unsolicited bid back to any of your potential contractors or companies, you did the 2 studies. I don't want to change the subject, but sometimes in conversations between different people from different labs, maybe just at lunch, somebody would mention the blues. And maybe the rest of the people at that table had no idea what you were referring to. And because one fellow's referring it to his friend over here, it was the blues that did so-and-so, or they said so-and-so, like this.
So you'd hear this in casual conversation. It's code speak, but only those on the inside are.
Yeah, because you normally don't talk about that, okay?
Yeah.
But that continually did come out, and most people never put the 2 things together to what this really was, because essentially you're being advised by extraterrestrials on a standard basis.
And really, it's relatively safe anyway, because the blues could refer to anything, really, a bundle of wires, an assembly, a screwdriver, who knows, it could be anything, craftsman.
That's true, yeah. But blues came along later, and that was something on a continuous base, okay, of, you gotta say, open extraterrestrial assistance.
Yeah. Did you know about the blues before Bill just now mentioned it?
Never heard of the blues.
Look, we just all kinds of revelations today here. Thank you for all these gifts, Bill. It's really.
Well, it's part of what we're doing, okay, and it's part of what we've been doing. There was. I'd like to go back, if we could, for a few minutes, to Admiral Ricabata's efforts with his operatives in Germany.
Do you want to talk about your experience and then get into that insofar as what it's like living as a young sailor working for Admiral Ricabata?
Yeah. First of all, I won't get into it, but if any of you folks out there are interested at all in what Bob and I are saying, please pick up that book that we've got, which is selected by extraterrestrials, okay? And wait a minute, if you don't even buy it, just get on your computer and type in William Tompkins. You don't even have to say Tompkins, the aerospace engineer. All you have to do is just type in William Tompkins. You're gonna get pages and pages and pages about this subject, okay? On the internet. Okay, but what was happening was that when I was 8 or 9 years old, I built a 6 different types of what I would assume a spaced rocket would be. I built the models, great big models. And one of the Navy commanders saw the models. He was a friend of my dad. And so he said, you ought to build ship models. Yeah, that's a good model. You ought to build ship models. So anyway, I built some 45 Navy ship models, where an aircraft carrier is about this big, a destroyer is about this big, all the same scale.
These are all on display in
Yeah,
Carlos now.
and I'm just a kid, and so I look up stuff in the newspapers. I look and start collecting different types of magazine articles where they've got photographs of different ships. And then my dad takes us down. We were living in Hollywood. My dad takes us down to Long Beach, and the Navy has these enormous, big, powered, open boats, powered boats that they use to transport personnel to and from the ships to the base, to the harbor. So we rode those out like on a Sunday afternoon. So we get to walk on the ships quite a bit. They hardly covered up too much, but you couldn't take a camera. So I'm interested in the latest version of, say, an aircraft carrier's secret equipment, where the 3-inch anti-aircraft guns are, where the big 5-inch automatic anti-aircraft guns are located on the ship. And I have to have my models just as most up to date as I can get them. And so then I need radar, and I need where, I didn't know it at the time, but I walked the flight deck of one of the carriers. I think it was the Lexington, and very large ship. And they had steam catapults up on the bow where they used to catapult the aircraft off so they get a lot of them off real fast, whole squadron of them. And then they had arresting gears where you had a hook on the back of the airplane. You drop down on the final approach to the flight deck, and your hook that's dropped down catches on a cable, and that stops you. So you don't have to take a lot of the runway space. So, of course, those were all secret things. So I walk the deck, and I have a little pad, and I make a sketch of that, how big it is, where it's located, and this sort of thing. And then radar was a problem. But at that time, they had rectangular radars with some types of structure in between the big main support. So I walked the deck to where I can find the sun throwing a shadow onto the flight deck. So I walk that size of the shadow, and I mark that down. Then I go up to the bow, and I walk the length of the steam catapult. And when I get home, I make perspective drawings of this, and then 3 view drawings of these, so that I can add these onto the ship.
This is all from, a lot of the stuff's from memory as well, so it's from your memory and, as I understand it, and your drawings.
Yeah, and so then I make the drawings. And so publicity sort of got out on the ship models, and there was a couple of articles in the newspaper. But what was more important, they had the models located in the window of the Broadway department store on Hollywood Boulevard. And 2 naval officers saw that, and they went in and asked the people in the store who the fellow was and could you get a hold of him and this sort of thing. And there wasn't anything wrong with that. And then the next week, after they had been there, my dad is in his office over on Wilshire Boulevard, and 2 of these fellows come in, and they don't arrest him, they detain him. okay? But they detained him for 2 days and 2 nights,
This is your father.
my dad. And they want to know where he got that information, particularly with all of this secret stuff. And the fact that they had, as recently as 5 months before, relocated every anti-aircraft gun on the ship, okay? And before that, some of them didn't even have those guns on board, okay? This is before the war. So the next day, they let my dad out, and he took them over to our little 2-bedroom apartment house in Hollywood, and I shared a bedroom with my brother. And so they come in there to the bedroom, and I've got all these drawings and sketches and everything, and I've got all these newspaper articles and magazine articles and all this stuff. And it's piled halfway up to the windows on the side, all around the room. And they finally figure out this kid knows what he's doing, and he's doing something that's pretty accurate. Anyway, from that, I was called into, several months later, I was called into what would be a naval intelligence office in San Pedro, California. And they talked to me a lot. And so what I'm trying to get to here is, how did you get into the Navy, and how did you get to this position working for Admiral Ricabata? So my dad gets contacted again. He takes off work, drives me back down to that same base, and the same Navy commander was there that we talked to, and he inducts me into the Navy. And I'm in my first year of high school, about halfway through it. So because there was a real security problem about my family moving so many times, actually my dad didn't have money to pay the rent, so we'd move into a place for 2 months, he didn't pay the rent, and we'd get thrown out and go someplace else.
So this makes getting your security clearance a little problematic, trying to track all those places.
So when they found this out, to alleviate that, the time it was going to take it, they inducted me into the Navy, okay? And they put me to work at the Vultee Aircraft Company over in Downey, California. And they were developing a new Navy gull-wing, large Navy attack aircraft in a secret area in their facility.
Excuse me, you went to basic training before this or after?
After.
After.
So the other thing I want to kind of clarify is, because I'm trying to think, how old was I when I was a sophomore in high school? 14, 15? I mean, you had to have been incredibly young. I mean, to be inducted in the Navy, be pulled out, they had to be breaking rules left and right to put you in.
Whatever it was, they did what they did. So they put me to work at this Vultee company, and supposedly it was just be for a couple of 3 weeks. Well, they did this. And so it turned out to be quite a bit longer, because there were other problems with my dad, and I guess I never found out what that was till later, and that was his involvement with Freemasons. Anyway, I didn't know anything about Dad being a Freemason. So I got notification that I was to report back to Naval Intelligence in San Pedro, and they flew me down to San Diego. And instead of going in like normal recruits, I was driven right over to the facility for the Naval Training Station in San Diego, and I went in. And so I finished half of the normal training, and I got called for another order to skip that day, and they took me in a Navy boat across the bay from the Naval Training Station to North Island. And I'm in North Island now, and I end up in an office building in an engineering department where they convert aircraft from the old versions to new versions of the airplanes. Big engineering department. And I'm introduced to, well, for 2 days I just sat in this office. And then I'm introduced to a Navy commander. He gave me some papers to study, and for another couple of weeks I don't know anything else either. I don't see anybody. I talked, when I first met him, he said, don't come in here without shining your shoes. And I had a dress uniform, but I just used sort of a sloppy seaman's work uniform in an office, okay? And I guess I didn't shine my shoes. So the third week, he calls me over, and he's got a lot of stuff for me to do. And he said, I'm out of here. It's yours. That's the only instruction I got from this commander.
I'm out of here, it's yours.
It's yours.
Allow me to summarize. 14, 15 years old, go in the Navy, you don't finish your training.
17, come on.
17, okay, I don't know how old are you in the 9th grade, 10th grade, 17. You know, I mean, you're not even 18 in the Navy. They put you in training, they pull you out of training, they stick you in a building over here for, read this, shine your shoes, I'm out of here, it's yours.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
Now, wait a minute, I'm a
17 years old.
Okay, wait a minute, I'm a third-class seaman, okay?
Even better.
With all these officers around, okay? And
Do you see how this doesn't make any sense?
no, it doesn't make sense, okay? This nice young lady comes over to me, and it turns out that she's the engineering president. This is very strange. It's a Navy facility.
Really?
North Island Naval Air Station is strange, but it's structured exactly like an aircraft company. So the title of the president of the company, or the engineers, or the engineer managers, or the drafting staff, or whatever, they all got commercial names, but they're all Navy officers, okay? And
Hang on a second.
so
Hang on a second. So, Bob.
I have a picture in the other room of him with the women that he was working with at that time.
Okay.
oh, you have the picture?
I had the picture.
Oh, is this one we were talking about over lunch?
Yeah, that was one I was going to show you.
Can you get that?
Yeah.
Take a break here. Just say, keep rolling. We're good. We'll just keep rolling.
Actually, this one is worth. No, this one is worth seeing.
So, all right, while he's off doing that, basically, you know, I was ribbing Bill. It's like everywhere he goes, it's like it's all about the skirts. You know, he's always working with the ladies. You know, everywhere. You know, there's a foxy secretary or two or three, and every job you've had, it seems there are all these beautiful women.
And actually, they all were, okay, beautiful. They all were top level. They all were graduates, and they all were tremendously capable.
So you got all these people running around.
Every place I went, I had those.
Yeah.
Okay, don't ask me why.
I
I
won't.
can't answer that either.
I just find it just odd that, you know, here you are, a third-class seaman, and officers going, it's all yours. That doesn't make any sense. These guys are running around in Navy, playing Navy, but really they're corporate on a Navy base.
We have to get this in your when we're talking, but
Yeah, we are talking.
But I'm just saying. I got flight skins, okay?
Yeah.
Which means I fly every month, okay? And this means that I am going to be trained not just as some guy to help out on an airplane. I'm going to end up being a pilot. And lo and behold, the Admiral has a high-wing, 7-passenger, big single-engined airplane that he flies all over. And I end up on board that airplane, flying all over western United States.
As a pilot?
With his pilot training me to be a pilot.
Okay.
And that, I got navigation, I got everything, and I never went to school one day, okay? And when I came out to get a regular pilot's license, I went through that because I didn't have to take all the tests I could automatically take, okay? But the point is that I was getting flight skins, so now I'm flying co-pilot on a Navy PB-4Y2 float airplane,
Oh, jeez.
okay?
Okay, oh my God.
Now, with
Is this
that,
you? Is this really you?
that is little Billy Tompkins, come
No,
on.
Billy Tompkins is attractive.
Now, the
Gentlemen,
girl in the middle above my head, that's the
Yep.
one that I went with.
Okay,
She was my girlfriend.
all right.
And actually, she was one of the gals that helped me out.
This is actually a really cool picture. I like this. This is like something you might,
It's got the badges on. It says North Island, I think, doesn't it?
yeah, ANR NASSD. North Island. What's the SSD stand for?
Yeah.
What is SSD?
Now, this is a photograph of me working.
Oh, it says NASSD. What's the SSD? Yes, I was. You know, my father and grandfather and uncles are all Navy. I don't know this. Pathetic. Just pathetic. All right. So you want to get? You want to go? Can you go tight on that?
We'll set it aside.
All right. We'll do a side later. All right. That's an awesome picture. That is really cool.
That is awesome.
Preserve
really
that.
is.
That's very nice.
But anyway, so I didn't get the skins till later, but the commander that left had another fella, and his secretary came over and said, "We got to talk." And so I went into his office, and he sort of explained to me what I was going to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what the length of time was that the commander had been doing this job before I got there, but I know it must have been at least 1 year. So this is 1942, so that meant that Rick Abata was doing his thing in 41, okay? Which meant that Admiral Rick Abata had gone to 4 aircraft companies before he even got assigned to Commander Naval Air Station San Diego and discussed this subject, okay? So the third week that I was there, the first operative come in. I have to say that's not correct. 2 operatives had come in and I didn't meet. I was not in the meeting. The third week that I was there, I was invited into one of these meetings in that conference room up on top of the commander's
tower you mentioned.
tower, yeah.
North Island.
So the way it's set up is Admiral Rick, the big table. Admiral Rick Abata's here. I'm sitting next to him here. One of the Navy captains, of which I had 3 captain bosses and 4 altogether because Admiral Rick Abata was the 4th boss. So one of them would be there. The secretary would be on the end of the table to type, and the operative would be on the opposite side of the table. So this is all new to me. I get a little bit of information. We're supposed to try to listen to what's going on and make comments as required. So I never had any training for this, okay? And it took a little while to figure out what was going on. So the first guy that came in was one of the older Navy lieutenants in this spy group, which they never called them spies, but they're naval operatives. And they are like investigators in Germany and the occupied countries, attempting to find out what the SS is doing and what the situation is with extraterrestrials are doing things with the SS. None of this made any sense. So that was one of the few fellows that was there for a full week. Almost every one of the rest of them for 3.5 years, they were only there for the period of the 1 day, max 2 days, and they're back on the flight back.
Yeah, these are the operatives you're talking about. So
Operatives are gone.
in and out.
So we don't even have time to work with these operatives. It's just what he can give us now. And it had already been decided, I didn't do it, that they were going to put together packages and actually distribute them out to different technical organizations in the country on a classified basis. No document that I saw had secret stamped on it, not even confidential. We learned it later on. I learned it later on. That's the way they handled it. So after the operator had finished presenting his information, and after one or two of the captains finished all the questions to try to get better answers to what he's presenting, and the admiral does too, it was my job to stay with him for the rest of the day, the night, and the next day before he gets on another plane and goes back, okay? So I'm to be his buddy to help him whatever it is that he needs. If he needs whatever needs, I got to see that he gets this, okay? And by that same time, I'm to get as much additional information as I can from him of what he had presented. So I'm handed a document from the captain that's there and another note from the admirals over here. Questions. Okay, I get that the next morning. In fact, it's when I go in the next morning, that's the first thing I get. But going back to how this starts by day is that always after midnight, the admirals, I'm in my barracks asleep. The admiral's aide comes in the barracks, taps me on the shoulder and says one thing: he's here. Nothing else. I get dressed as fast as I can get dressed, and I still just look like your photograph of me.
Okay.
That's the way I look, okay? That's it. And I got my little badge. So I grab coffee on the way over. We get in there, the operative's sitting there already, and he's got stuff on the floor next to him. He's got stuff on the table. And then he's got his own notes, pretty well outlined. Some of these guys were real sharp. And he presents this information, if it's communications, something about communications, he has a box full of stuff. Whereas if it's about some sort of propulsion systems, very little. I mean, sketches, notes, this sort of thing, a couple of drawings.
Occasional photos?
Occasional photos, and also there were the hieroglyphics, okay? And he made his notes on the hieroglyphics from talking to the other German guys as to what do you guys understand what that was? What did this one mean? Okay, and he would have a photograph of that particular bar or that structure, piece of metal.
So these operatives would get in a position where they can see the technology that's been worked on. It's got certain things, glyphs inscribed upon them. Whether they're Egyptian hieroglyphs or not, there's some kind of a glyph. It's something that we don't recognize.
Yeah.
And they've got some notes in there about, I assume, what this thing is. And
Yeah.
But as far as decoding what these glyphs are, do the operatives have any clue? Do they even know?
So this, what I'm trying to say is, I had one buddy that was a commander, and he was really friendly with me, and he knew what I was doing. And so I kept asking him, you know, what in the hell, why do they do this? And I'm trying to get a better feel. We need a whole lot more information than that. How are we going to, and I always said me, because I never thought I was going to be the one that had to deliver it, okay? I said, how are you guys going to get this over to Lockheed? Or gosh, you said you're working with JPL and Caltech. You're working with them? How are you going to explain this? And I'm looking for a manual. Okay, give me a manual. And we don't even have a German manual on this. And but this first one was really hard for me.
Yeah, so what you've described so far is really your first foray into this world, and you're expressing, it sounds like a little bit of frustration. This is my new job. There's pieces missing here. What am I supposed to do?
But surprisingly enough, I seemed to come on board faster than I thought I would. Okay, and I did get help from the captains. There was two of the captains that really helped me a lot. The other guy was around once in a while, never did help me. But it was that this is your job. You're not doing anything else except putting these packages together, and nothing was said about mailing the packages to the contractors.
It's all very unusual. I mean, that they would pick you, that you're so young, that you didn't finish training, that et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You fall into this position.
Yeah.
And now all this responsibility is kind of heaped onto your shoulders.
But wait a minute, I missed the most important thing. In Dr. Black's English lesson class at Hollywood High School, I can't spell, and I can't talk. So he takes me, puts me up in the front, and makes me do a dissertation, a presentation, and spell everything right. And I'm still spelling it wrong.
Yeah, this is before the Navy got a hold of you?
Yeah, I'm back in Hollywood High School before they took me. Okay, anyway, so I can't spell. Now this guy knows I can't spell.
Yeah, also, I've seen your writing, Bill. I know you can't spell.
All right. Anyway, so this goes on, and we then take this rough information. I get two of the girls that my girlfriend manages, and we start to put together a breakdown. We already had a breakdown that they had been using for these organizations, and we were able to put this together and get pretty good packages together, and then run copies of this. So we've got it, and at least one of the three Navy captains has filed every single one of these besides our regular files, okay? And nothing is classified, but we've all got it documented. And so then I have this photo lab. The Navy had a big photo lab there, and the old commander that left, he had this small personal used Photoshop. And you've seen the pictures of it, and you've seen the gals that run it, okay?
That one right over there.
Right over there.
So when Bill says Photoshop, it's not the Adobe program. It's a place that processes pictures, photographs.
Yeah, so, but we know not only photographs, but we run copies of all kinds of stuff that are possible related to this, that is part of the package, okay? That we then can say, I don't know whether this is that or not, but that's what he indicated.
Right. I think Bill or Bob, you wanted to make a point?
Yeah, I think, Bill, you've described in great clarity the process that you went through for these 29 people for those 2 or 3 years. And clearly their focus had been told to be the technology of the UFOs, largely, right? And my question is, did they ever talk about Antarctica? going to Antarctica, submarines, big submarines, taking people to Antarctica, relationship to the any reptilians in Antarctica, or was that kind of out of scope?
The operatives knew about Antarctica. They knew about it.
They did, okay.
So yes, that information went to Ricabada.
Okay,
And that was part of some of the things that were being programmed because one of the operatives, Bob, he was into a specific facility, and the facility was being packed up and being shipped to a different location.
okay.
And one of the other operatives at a different point, because we whenever we're discussing with the new operator, or one of the operators just came in, we always ask of, do they know what Jim is doing? Or have you seen Howard lately? Do you know what he's involved
But none of
in?
the operatives came from Antarctica, as far as you know.
No, but
Okay.
they said stuff is being shipped to the submarine base.
Okay,
And then another thing from a total different area, they have built massive truck submarines. The Germans had,
400 people, sort of thing.
yeah.
Okay.
But it's not just people, they would haul equipment too.
Did they ever talk about high energy weapons like lasers
Yes,
during the war?
yes.
During your debriefs, that when the operatives are coming through, they were talking about the high energy laser weapons?
Yeah,
See, that's consistent with a report that's in one of the recent books I've read of a 400-foot submarine apparently had to surface, and they were sighted by a British destroyer or cruiser, and they killed the destroyer with laser weapons. And this was like in the late 44 or so. And I just read that like 2 weeks ago as a report.
and it's not that just they were researching them. The SS was given brand shiny new ones, okay? So you didn't have to start from scratch from a bunch of pieces of paper like what I'm giving to these companies to go try to make something like that.
And they weren't the Nordics providing this either. It was another group of extraterrestrials that had given the SS complete, a multitude, just different, 14 different types, did you say? There was a number that you had written, I don't recall, but
I think
it was more than one.
13.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 13 different types of hardware, operable craft. Meanwhile, so we're here.
But I got the impression that on some of these, the Nazis mounted ordinary machine guns
Yeah.
and weapons. But on others of them, apparently, they may have considered using laser weapons.
They did use the laser weapons on them, the bigger ones.
Okay. Were the laser weapons invented by the Germans or by the reptilians?
Reptilians.
Okay. See, that would be new information.
Yeah. The Germans, wait a minute, the Germans got real smart, okay? They were smart before this happened. Germans were very brilliant people, okay? Why they had to pick the SS to go do the thing that they were going to do, maybe they figured that what their missions are is not really very legal, okay? And it may be that that's the reason, but back to this information that comes in. You had other pieces of paper with different types of numbering systems, okay, on it that weren't German. They weren't anything that we knew about. And so they would be identified by this numbering system. And of course, this was an extraterrestrial piece of paper, okay? And here it is. We're not going to tell you how it works. That's what we're asking you, Lockheed, to do. We're giving you a contract. You got to figure this out. So I'm getting this stuff from every place that I go with these documents. You know, you dumb a-hole or something, don't give us something like this. How do we do, what do we do with this?
Right, so they're calling you out because you've got really what amounts to what I mentioned earlier. It's like a post-it note with a stick figure. Here, go make a flying saucer.
It's not a request for a proposal.
It's,
And so don't blame them for having a hard time trying to figure out what the hell does the Navy want us to do.
right. I remember asking about the Germans because they were provided the technology, but in the form of the hardware, but there also some documentation, teaching, and even they had some challenges interpreting the written script or whatever was provided to them. Is that accurate?
Absolutely, yes.
So they also had, they couldn't read what was given to them on the written page, you know, and here here are operatives somehow getting access to at least some of that, I would assume, bringing it back and expecting our people to do create something based on a subset of something they have.
But remember though, actually, they had reptilians there that looked like humans, okay? They had reptilian guys there that looked just like us that they could go ask to help us out here. We didn't have anything like that in the United States. We just had these frivolous packages with notes in them.
Do you think that any of the well-known Nazis that were photographed were actually reptilians?
I never thought that, but other people had said they thought some of them were.
Don't know yet.
I never thought it,
Okay.
but I don't know. But we're just trying to say, please, you've got to realize how hard this was on American organizations to take this information and run with it. And if you stop and think, what you just said was that somebody in the Navy gave Lockheed Aircraft Company one of these packages. And 4 years later, the Skunk Works gets started. And so isn't this upside down with what you thought? And so, yes, the programs were secret in every one of the companies, organizations, but information is leaking out. And eventually, the Skunk Works becomes reality. And it's sort of like a small think tank at Lockheed. But it starts from a package out of a two-star admiral's office at North Island. Wow. Yeah. It's interesting when you visualize this system that was going on and the complexities with which you're trying to help people do something when you don't give them the tools to do it.
Yeah, I'm sure others have asked you this question too. I mean, World War II, if the Nazis, the SS, whoever has been provided this, I mean, this is advanced technology based on what you're describing here. I mean, we couldn't hold a candle to any of that stuff. How did they lose the firing battle war with the bullets and all that? I mean, we went over there, we mowed over Europe, and we ferreted out all the Nazis, and yay, go America. America, right? NATO. We won over there. Did we win?
You didn't win the war. You did not win the war, okay? Even before the war started, a blonde young lady was contacted to put together a group of friends and be influenced by extraterrestrials to design and build a massive propulsion system in a large space transport.
Bob, did you have a thought you wanted to toss in there? You look like you had a...
No, I'm good. Okay.
And so
Well, yeah, so Maria Orsic...
yeah, Maria was doing this, okay? And she was doing it some of it in Antarctica, okay? And so the SS finds out about this, and they confiscate all of the people and all the equipment and everything they're using and sort of make them slaves, but just for a very short period of time, less than 4 months. And then the SS gave it all back to them and said, you guys go ahead and work with the extraterrestrials you're working with. We're working with these extraterrestrials.
Doesn't that seem to run counter to whatever their agenda? Let's talk about the agenda. I mean, why would the reptilians give the SS all this technology? There's got to be some kind of agenda behind that. And if it's domination, whatever it is, why would they take it, especially advanced technology like that, and then give it back?
Okay.
Doesn't that run counter to the goal? I'm assuming the goal is they just want to take over the world or whatever.
Yeah. Well, all these ladies became the 1,442 people in that book right here, which is mentioned 5 or 6 times. So they felt that there would be possibly additional technical assistance to the young ladies and the men that are working this, okay? Her group, which may be beneficial to them, and we're going to let you develop your own. We've got all the assistance that we possibly could ever need to do this. So we took off, then the SS takes off on their own and goes past the young ladies and the other men that helped that organization.
But Walter's question was, if they had such technology, how come they let us win the war? And I guess a partial answer to that might be that they had their Hanabu 3, I think, in production, but I think they only were able to use it one night. Allegedly, they used it once and shot down a whole bunch of airplanes, but they didn't have enough to really defeat us in the air. That's point one. Point two is I think that they had kind of early on decided that they wanted to put their real strength down in Antarctica. So they shipped the majority of their UFO technology down there because their goal was really to go out into space, not necessarily just to beat the United States. But that's my speculation.
Yeah, and Bob is right with that. They go back to the missions, back to Hitler's mission with the extraterrestrials. First was Hitler wanted to take out all of the people he didn't like, the Jewish people. So you just take them out, whatever way. But secondly, you take every man, woman, and child on this planet and put them in these in-mountain production facilities all over Germany and the occupied country, building thousands and thousands and thousands of extraterrestrial vehicle, military space vehicle, and operate out in the galaxy with these, along with the reptilian naval battle groups, and do the same thing, enslave every planet they can find out there off of every star they can find.
But they never got thousands done before they lost the war.
Yeah.
What final word would you guys like to have before we close off this day?
Oh, but before Bob sits with his, let me try to say, the way Bob's going to say it eloquently. I'm just going to rough something.
I'll roll.
Personally, wait a minute. No, personally, I want to see this information disseminated out across the planet. Okay, I want the public to understand what has happened. I want that that they have sufficient information to bypass this problem. I don't believe anything you're saying, and start to accept this reality of extraterrestrials. Okay, and it's imperative to the people on this country to understand what their position is, and this needs to be fixed. And any help we can get from any extraterrestrials out there to counter some of these black hat people out there, this is great for us. We need to get everybody involved.
I've got a limited perspective at this point. I think there's two things that drive my thinking. One is the incredible sophistication that organizations, including governments, have had in keeping secrets. That's thought number one. And I believe that can be a convincing story, but it's a challenge because most people believe Washington can't keep secrets. And it's very difficult to get over that little hump. The second thing is I would say I'm not looking toward the aliens to solve our problems. I'm thinking that full disclosure will probably let the best results flop out. So I would say I'd go for full disclosure about everything, including disclosing things that would put a lot of people in jail because I think they deserve to be in jail. So those are my two main thoughts. And I think Bill's story really supports both of those arguments. Bill is himself trying to get the truth out, and I think the truth can set you free. Nothing wrong with that.
Indeed. Well, someday we'll have that, shall we?
Yeah.
Yes, it's better sooner than later.
Better sooner than later.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, thank you everybody for watching my YouTube channel, Search for Truth Reality. This is today with Dr. Robert Wood. Thank you. And William Tompkins, as always, thank you very much. And we'll see you all next time.